The American Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865, was a defining moment in the history of the United States. It was a conflict that pitted the Union States of the North against the Confederacy of the South. The war had a profound impact on the nation, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans and the abolition of slavery. But what really started the American Civil War? In this video, we will examine the various factors that led to the conflict. The origins of the American Civil War can be traced back to the founding of the United States. When the country was first established, there were deep divisions between the North and South, particularly on issues related to slavery. The North had a more industrialized economy and had gradually abolished slavery, while the South had an agrarian economy that relied heavily on slave labor. As a result, the issue of slavery became a contentious issue that divided the nation. One of the key factors that led to the American Civil War was political and economic. In the years leading up to the conflict, tensions between the North and South were high, particularly on issues related to trade and tariffs. The North had a more diversified economy and advocated for higher tariffs to protect their industries, while the South relied heavily on exports and opposed such measures. Additionally, the North was increasingly opposed to the expansion of slavery into new territories, while the South wanted to protect the institution of slavery and expand it into new areas. This led to a series of compromises in Congress, such as the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850, which attempted to balance the interests of both regions. However, tensions continued to rise, particularly with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which allowed for the possibility of slavery in new territories. This led to a violent conflict in Kansas known as Bleeding Kansas, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces clashed. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was a significant factor in the outbreak of the American Civil War. Lincoln was a Republican who opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories, and his election was seen as a threat to the interests of the South. As a result, several Southern states, starting with South Carolina, seceded from the Union, forming the Confederacy. The formation of the Confederate States of America was another key factor in the outbreak of the Civil War. The Confederacy was formed by 7 Southern states that seceded from the Union, and was later joined by 4 additional states. The Confederacy was led by Jefferson Davis, and its primary goal was to preserve the institution of slavery and protect the interests of the South. The first shots of the American Civil War were fired at Fort Sumter, a federal fort located in South Carolina. The Confederate forces attacked the fort in April 1861, forcing the Union soldiers to surrender. This event marked the beginning of the conflict, and several more states seceded from the Union in the following months. The war was fought on many fronts, with key battles including the Battle of Gettysburg and the Battle of Antietam. The Union had several advantages over the Confederacy, including a larger population, more industrialized economy, and better transportation infrastructure. Additionally, the Union had a superior navy, which allowed them to blockade southern ports and prevent the Confederacy from receiving crucial supplies. Despite several early Confederate victories, the tide of the war turned in favor of the Union in 1863. General Ulysses Grant, who had been appointed by President Lincoln to lead the Union Army, was instrumental in turning the tide of the war. By 1865, the Union Army had captured the Confederate capital of Richmond, and General Robert Lee surrendered his army at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. The Union victory in the American Civil War had a profound impact on the nation. It led to the abolition of slavery and the reunification of the United States. The Union victory also had significant social and economic consequences, as the South was forced to rebuild its economy and society in the aftermath of the war. Additionally, the Union victory had long-term political consequences. It established the federal government as the ultimate authority in the United States, and reinforced the idea of a strong central government. This helped to shape the political landscape of the United States in the years that followed, and set the stage for the country's emergence as a global superpower in the 20th century. On January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in Confederate territory were to be set free. This proclamation did not actually free any slaves immediately, as it only applied to areas that were not under Union control. However, it had a significant impact on the course of the war and the fight to end slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation helped to shift the focus of the war from simply preserving the Union to also ending slavery. It gave the Union Army a moral purpose beyond preserving the country, and it helped to convince many African Americans to join the Union Army and fight for their freedom. The Civil War did not officially end slavery, but it did lead to the passage of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This amendment, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude in the United States. The 13th Amendment was the culmination of years of efforts by abolitionists and anti-slavery activists to end the institution of slavery in the United States. It was a momentous achievement, and it helped to cement the end of slavery as an enduring legacy of the Civil War. The end of slavery had a profound impact on American society. It helped to pave the way for the civil rights movement of the 20th century, as African Americans were able to assert their rights as citizens and demand equal treatment under the law. However, while the end of slavery was a significant achievement, it did not lead to an end to racism and discrimination in the United States. African Americans continued to face violence, discrimination, and unequal treatment under the law for many years after the end of slavery.